And hello and welcome to College Drive here on Georgia Sports Media Network, Stream City Radio, Stream City Sports, streamcity.org if you want to listen to the radio portion of it. Jumping back into the comparison of the conferences, looked at the SEC on Friday. We're going to look at the Big Ten this afternoon and see how the two of those shake out. We'll go over basically the basics of it again in case you didn't see the SEC one. Pretty simply, what is important, what's not important. Bowl games, doesn't matter. Not the same team you played the regular season with. You've got coaches, players opting out, going NIL, taking other jobs. You cannot compare those. That's not a data point that matters because it's not the same team you played the regular season with. Playoffs don't matter because we've got an uneven number of teams participating from each conference, and that only measures the top portion of your conference, not top to bottom, which is what this conversation is about. What does matter? Non-conference games against Power Five specifically, but also Group of Fives, not so much the FCS teams. Unless you lost to an FCS team, that data point's not going to be in here because just coaches have a wildly different approaches to those ball games. You'll have coaches that'll be up 28-0. He doesn't have a starter left in the ball game. You got other coaches will be up 70-0, and they're starting 22 are still playing. So we can't really. That one gets thrown to the side. So basically, what we're left with is conference games or non-conference games in the regular season against the Group of Five and the Power Four. That's the games we're looking at. So, how did we do? How did I do this? How did I break it down? Very simply, I broke all the conferences into tiers. Top two teams are tier 1, third and fourth team tier 2, so on and so forth, all the way down to tier 8 in the power teams, and down to tier 12 with the Group of Five, starting actually with tier 6 for the majority of the Group of Five. Tier 5 with the American Conference because I feel like it's just a little bit better conference. Did all this before, came up with that formula before I started plugging numbers in because I want this to be as unbiased as possible. I've been very upfront about the fact that I'm an SEC fan. I'm a Georgia fan. I still think the SEC is going to come out on top of this thing. We're going to run the numbers and see. And the other big debate is, has the SEC lost its dominance? That's a yes. They're not as dominant as they once were. For 25, 30 years, you couldn't touch them. They were playing each other in national championship games. They were winning all of them they played with the exception of a couple against Clemson. It just, and one against Ohio State. Got to throw that one in there. But in general, you couldn't touch the dominance of what the SEC did there for a while. It is not that case anymore. I still think it's the best conference. We'll see how things play out. So, anyhow, you get you got the tiers, and then you earn back points for margin of victory, depending on whether it's home, neutral site, away. For instance, a home game won by 3 or fewer points gets you nothing at home. Gets you 1 point at neutral, 2 in an away setting, all the way out to the most points you can earn is 15, and to do that on the, you're in the 40s by the time you do that. Because basically, I'm giving you an extra point for every third or fourth point up. 0 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 10, so on and so forth. Carries all the way out. All right, examples of how I did that. We use Georgia and Marshall as an example. Georgia's a level 110 team. Marshall's a level 10 team. So Georgia we're starting everything at 12 is dead center because there's 12 levels. So Georgia starts out with 3 out of 12. They earn back 13 points for a 38-point home victory. So their total ends up being 16. So you're 4 points above the median line. Georgia Tech versus Georgia. So tier 1 versus tier 3 at a neutral site. Georgia gives up 2 points for being a tier 1 to a tier 3 team. They win by 7 in a neutral site, which wins them 2 points. So that is a push for the two conferences. Nobody really getting an advantage out of that. Basically, it ending the way you would expect a Tier 1 versus Tier 3 game to end. On a neutral site, a 7-point victory, a 4 to 7 point victory by the higher rated team, and that's what you got. It's a push. Last one, Texas, Ohio State. Here we have a Tier 1 hosting a Tier 3 team. So Ohio State starts out at 10 instead of 12, giving away 2 points. They win by 7. That's worth 1 point at home. So they actually, even though they win the ball game, when we're comparing the conferences, it's a slight victory for the SEC because it was a Tier 3 team on the road against a Tier 1, and they played them, only lost by 7. So that's how that works. So let's go through the top half of the Big Ten. What did we have? Starting out with Indiana and Ohio State, so that's your 2 Tier 1 teams. Indiana playing a team out of the Sun Belt and a team out of Conference USA as their non-conference games. They won over Kennesaw State easily, 56-9. It's a 1 versus 6, so they were the highest tier in Conference USA. So you earn back 15 points on this one. You're only giving away 5, so you're going to have a net gain of 10. So 22 points for Indiana in the win against Kennesaw State. Old Dominion didn't go quite as well. Much closer ball game, 27-14. Also a Tier 1 versus 6. So you earned back 3 points, but you were giving away 5, so you end up with a 10. So in the grand scheme of things, that is a victory for the Sun Belt over the Big Ten in that situation. Because, like I said, we're not determining who the better team is here. We're determining who played better in reference to conferences. So wins and losses are not the end-all, be-all. You win a game and still end up with a loss in this scenario. Much like Ohio State did against Texas. 7-point victory, 1 versus 3 in the tiers. And so Texas ends up with 13 points. Ohio State gets 11, and people are going to say, yeah, but Texas and Ohio State were rated the same. I don't care where they were rated at the time. I care where they finished in the pecking order in their conference. Texas ended up in the 3rd tier of the SEC. Ohio State clearly in the top tier of the Big Ten, so therefore advantage SEC in that ball game. Then they take on an Ohio club that they beat up on pretty good, 37-9 the final in that ball game. This is a Tier 1 versus Tier 6 game, so they're giving away 5 points. So they end up gaining back 8 for the victory over Ohio, end up with a score of 15. So your top 2 teams in the Big Ten come away with scores of 13 on average and 16 on average. So just above average and really a good number in 16 with Indiana. And we'll look how that compared against the top of the SEC here in just a moment. Next up, we're going to take a look at Tier 2 teams out of the Big Ten. This is going to be Oregon and USC. Oregon also playing a pair of non-conference games. USC, one of the few teams that did not play a group of 5, FCS school in the Big Ten. So Oregon just put a mollywhopping on Oklahoma State. Couldn't have beat them much worse. 69-3. And probably could have been worse than that, but like I said, 15 points is the most you can get. Now, they were giving up 6 because they're a Tier 2 versus Tier 8 team, and Oklahoma State, the worst team in the Big 12. But you get your 15 points, so you still end up with 21, which is a huge number when we start comparing conferences, and end up on the plus side of things also in a rivalry game against Oregon State, 41-7 beat down in this one, a 2 versus 10. I took Washington, Oregon State, and kind of ranked them as far as tiers, along with Notre Dame, the 3 independents. Connecticut would be in there as well, according to a win-loss record. It's really the only way I could do it. So they come in as a Tier 10 team. So you're giving away 8 points. You win back 10, so you end up with a 14, a nice number in that ball game. So They come away with a total of 17.5, which is a really big number when you start comparing these conferences, especially on the top end. Top end is a little more difficult because of where you're rated as a Tier 1, Tier 2 team. You're going to max out a lot of times at 15 points, but you're giving away a ton of points. So those are big numbers for up there. The 17.5 is. USC also did really well. Like I said, they were one of the few teams that played 3 non-conference opponents that were FBS schools. First one, Missouri State, who didn't used to be, but is now. And it wasn't close, 73-13, 2 versus 8. So you're giving away 6, you earn back 15, 23 points. It's hard to do much better than that, especially when you're giving away 6 points. So 23 for USC is a massive number. Came back and did really well against Georgia Southern as well, 59-20, a 2 versus 9. You get 12 points back for that victory, and it was a total of 17. Here's where the problem came in. Notre Dame on the road. Now, you're not losing as many points in a loss on the road in this situation. 10-point loss on the road to Notre Dame is going to cost you 4 points. You're both level 2 teams. So you're going to lose all 4 of those points, so you end up with an 8. You still end up with a 16 overall, so a very nice number for USC. And the level 2 teams did really well in the Big Ten. Now let's jump down here to level 3. And this is Michigan and Iowa. Michigan, another team that played 3 FBS opponents in non-conference play. The first one, not overly impressive in game 1 against New Mexico. 34-17. New Mexico ends up at top of the Mountain West, so you're not giving away as many points, only giving away 3. It's a 3 versus 6. You get 5 for the victory at home, so you're at 14. Another nice start for the Big Ten. Oklahoma had a little bit of a setback here. You lose by 11 on the road to Oklahoma. It's a 3 versus 3, so you're not getting or giving any points as far as the matchup, but you lose 3 for the 10-point loss on the road, so you end up with a total of 9 in that ballgame. Then you wrap up with a huge outing against Central Michigan, 63-3 outing. All 15 points back. It's a 3 versus 8. You end up with a total of 22. Excuse me, for 15 overall for the Michigan Wolverines. Iowa, the other Tier 3 team out of the Big Ten, playing Iowa State, who was a Tier 4 out of the Big 12. So you're not giving up a lot of points there, just 1. And you're on the road. Well, you do lose by 3, but basically they earn no points for that. So you're giving away the 1 point for being the higher seed and basically get an 11 out of that situation. Then you play UMass, who everybody beat up on. You scored, and shout out to the nice folks we met in Arizona. We were in Arizona this weekend that this game was going on. And Georgia had just wrapped up against Tennessee, and UMass was getting ready to kick off against Iowa. So met some really nice folks at the sports bar out there in Phoenix. I wanted to give them a shout out. 47-7 in the final in this one. A 3 versus 12 hurts you a little bit. You're giving away 9 points, but you earn back 12, 15. So overall, when you look at in the grand scheme of things, still got 13 points. Performed above average for a level 3 team. And basically, that has been the case for everybody in the SEC, everybody in the Big Ten so far, as everybody's performed above the median, which is where you want to be. Now, Tier 3 or Tier 4, and this is where it gets a little different. Obviously, there's 8 tiers. There's 18 teams in the Big Ten, so Tier 4 and Tier 5 both got an extra team to level this thing out. When you look at Washington, the first of those Tier 4 teams, and they did play Colorado State and Washington State. You play Colorado State at opening weekend, 38-21. Nice victory, but doesn't help you much in this because it's a 4 versus 12 matchup. So you're giving away 8. You're going to get 5 points for the home victory. You end up in the hole even though you had an easy win just because the mismatch was such a great one. You get 9 points out of that. Now, you kind of make up for it when you take on Washington State, who you crushed 50-49 59-24 on the road. So it's a 4 versus 8. You're going to get 11 points, 19 points total for Washington to get an average of 14. Even though you underwhelmed the world with Colorado State, you made up for it and then some against Washington State. So still everybody performing above the median. And here's somebody who performed way above the median, and that's Illinois. That road win against Duke, where they went out and just crushed Duke on the road, 45-19 against a power team. It's a 4 versus 3 matchup, so you're actually getting a point, and you're on the road, and you won big. 23 points. Got a 10-point, get 10 points for the victory, and then add that to, so you end up with 23 overall. And because you get 1 point for being the lower rated team, gets you at 13, so that's the base you're working off, pushes you to 23. Huge number for one of the best wins of the season for the Big Ten outside of conference. And then you have Western Michigan comes in, you blank them, and put up another huge number. So it's a 4 versus 6 because Western Michigan towards the top of the MAC, 22 more points. So you end up with a 22.5, which is just mind-bogglingly good for Illinois. I have a hard time seeing anybody else matching that number for Illinois. And the final set of the Tier 4 teams out of the Big Ten, this did not go so well. It's Minnesota. Talking about the top end of the Big Ten in Iowa. Well, Minnesota's here to kind of level the playing field a little bit. They beat Buffalo only by 13 at home, and this is a 4 versus 9 matchup. So you get the win, you lose some points, you end up with 10 total out of that one, and do even worse against Cal. Go on the road, lose to Cal by 13, and lose 3 points in that one. It was a 4 versus 4, so you're getting nothing there. So you lose all 3 points. You end up with 9 for a total of 19 and a 9.5 average. And that ranks down there with, that's going to be competitive with what Kentucky put up in the SEC. We'll look at those in a moment. But just a bad number for Minnesota in that one. Okay, let's take a break and look at this top group and how the top of the Big Ten performed against the top of the SEC. Top of the SEC put up a 13.2, and that was Georgia and Ole Miss. Top of the Big Ten slightly better at 14.5, so more than a full point better. So that one, just comparing tier to tier, goes to the Big Ten. They got an even bigger advantage in Tier 2, where Alabama poisoned the well. 12.3 for the SEC. Somehow, even with that outing against Florida State, they ended up with their head above water, but just barely. And then they roll out a 16.75, does the Big Ten, for a decisive victory at Level 2. Level 3, the SEC gets a close victory in this one with a 15 over the Big Ten's 14. Very kind of somewhat comparable to what you got in Level 1. And then Tier 4, in spite of Illinois and everything they did, you just ended up on the Providence side, 15.3, because Minnesota brought you way down. The SEC put up a 17.3. So Tier 1 and 2 go to the Big Ten. Tier 3 and 4 go to the SEC. And when you're looking at it from that perspective, we're still kind of close, because the overall difference is 1 and 4 almost cross each other out. 2 and 3 almost cross each other out. So what we've got so far is a fairly even outing just on these numbers. Now we're going to dig deeper towards the end of the radio show and part 2 of the Big Ten podcast, and dig into these numbers a lot deeper than what we are. This is just a surface look at it, but right now you'd have to say fairly even between the top half of the Big Ten and the top half of the SEC. But like I said, we'll dig much deeper in these numbers as we do part 2 of, can't speak today, part 2 of the Big Ten podcast over on Stream City Sports. And we'll catch it in the second part of the show here on the radio on Stream City Radio, streamcity.org. Back in just a moment with more